You thought it was going well. They smiled. They nodded. They said, "I'm fine." But they weren't. And deep down, you felt it. You just couldn't explain why. Because their body was already revealing the truth. White knuckles gripping the glass. A double blink. A shallow breath before they spoke. These weren't random. They were signals. You just didn't know the code. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Words can mislead, but body language reveals. Tone can distract, but tension always shows. That forced laugh that doesn't reach the eyes, that paused too long to be natural, that smile held a second too tight. You've seen it. You felt it. But you didn't know how to interpret it. And that's what changes now. Because this isn't about gut instinct. This is a system, a method, one that turns observation into understanding. When you stop reacting and start reading, everything shifts. You'll know when they're uncomfortable, when they're holding back, when they're performing, not by what they say, but by what their body unconsciously reveals. A twitch, a swallow, a misplaced glance. These aren't accidents. They're communications. You just haven't been trained to understand them. Until now. So, here's your shift. Don't listen harder. Observe deeper. Because real understanding isn't in your voice. It's in what you see when they think you're not looking. If that makes your heart beat slower instead of faster, you're exactly where you're meant to be. Subscribe. Not to follow, but to finally understand what they were always communicating when their mouth was quiet. She sits across from you. Arms still, back straight. A smile softens the corners of her lips. And yet something feels off. "I'm okay," she says. But the words float hollow, detached, like she's trying to convince herself more than you. You lean in, not physically, but mentally, emotionally. You scan, not what she says, but what her body can't hide. And there it is. A twitch, a barely visible tremor in her lower lip, a supple blink, slightly too long. Her fingers tap once, then stop, then curl into her palm like she's holding something back. That's not conversation. That's communication. Unspoken, uncontrolled. Because no matter how calm someone appears, the body signals. Always. You don't read the face. You read the disconnect. Every expression is a moment of unconscious truth. And in that moment, they communicate honestly, whether they meant to or not. Let's be clear. This isn't magic. This isn't about some gifted sixth sense. This is about attention, about trained observation. Because most people, they don't hide their feelings well. They just hope you're not looking. They rely on politeness, on distraction, on your willingness to take things at face value. But when you slow down, when you stop reacting, you start decoding. That nervous glance, that half-second smirk, that swallow before a sentence begins, these aren't meaningless. They're emotional data points. And when aligned correctly, they form a map of everything someone is trying to process or suppress. Think of it like this. Words are edited, but the body sends signals too early. The real message is already out before they even finish speaking. And that's where the understanding is. Because once you train your eye to catch these signals, you stop believing performance. Let me take you deeper. A woman says, "I trust you," but her feet point toward the exit. Her shoulder angles away. That's not alignment. That's unconscious retreat. Someone says, "I'm not angry," but their jaw tightens. Their nostrils flare. Their voice drops half a pitch. That's not peace. That's suppression. Suppression always comes with tension. And tension always shows. Here's what professionals understand. Every negotiation, every important conversation, every high-stakes moment isn't about words. It's about reading the disconnect. What slips through? What shows when emotions press too hard? What reveals when the story doesn't match the feeling? And those signals are everywhere. In how fast someone blinks, in how long they pause before a yes, in how a smile disappears half a second too soon. These aren't overreactions. They're revelations. Now think about the last person who disappointed you. What did they say? "I didn't mean to. It wasn't personal. I just needed space." But how did they look when they said it? Did their eyes connect? Did their body lean forward or recoil? Was their smile tight? Was their voice even? You knew. Didn't you? You just didn't know how to name it. But now you do. That discomfort you felt, that quiet sense that something was off, that was your subconscious picking up the signal. And now that you're conscious of it, you don't have to be confused anymore. Because once you stop looking at what people want you to see and start watching for what unconsciously shows, you gain something rare. Not just clarity, but understanding. Understanding of communication. Understanding of emotion. Understanding of who deserves your trust and who doesn't. So here's your shift. Don't listen for truth. Watch for tension. Where there's tension, there's unexpressed emotion beneath it. Where there's a signal, there's a message more honest than any explanation. And the next time someone smiles and says, "I'm fine," don't respond right away. Pause. Observe. Let the silence do the revealing. Because in that silence, the truth emerges. And the one who understands it first gains clarity. Let's step into a conversation. A real one, but one you've probably heard versions of 1,000 times. Your manager sits across from you. Fingers laced. Voice calm. They say, "We're exploring options." It's not a no, but it's not a yes either. And just like that, you're left in uncertainty. It sounds neutral. It sounds considerate. But here's what actually happened. They said nothing. On purpose. Now, look closer. Why didn't they say, "We haven't decided yet"? Or simply, "We don't think it's the right time," because vague language isn't careless. It's protective. The words are soft. The structure is unclear. And most importantly, they remove themselves from the statement. We're exploring options. No, I think. No, I feel. No, I believe. They've pulled their identity out of the sentence. Why? Because when something goes wrong, they don't want to be held accountable. This is not bad communication. This is strategic deflection. And here's where it gets deeper. From communication psychology, we know this. Direct people are confident. They don't think they need to protect their position. So they speak in short, clear lines. Uncertain people, they add qualifiers. They talk more. They pause longer. They hedge. Not because they're deceptive, but because they're editing while speaking, trying to sound certain, trying not to reveal something. Example: I don't. I mean, I wouldn't say I definitely did that. Maybe I was just, trying to help. That's not denial. That's unconscious revelation. Listen to the endings of their sentences. They drop in volume, like they're walking backwards out of the idea they just presented, or they rush the last part, as if to bury it under rhythm. Either way, it's a signal. One your subconscious has already noticed, but your trained mind needs to catch, because the real tells are never shouted. They're whispered. Now here's what no one tells you. Words reveal structure of thought, not just content. Someone who's speaking clearly is thinking clearly. Someone who's twisting their language is processing complexity. And once you spot it, you won't unhear it. You'll be in a conversation and suddenly realize, this isn't communication. This is emotional management. Every kind of, I just feel like, not exactly no, will become a glowing signal. Because they're not communicating directly. They're communicating through structure, and now you've started to see the framework. You're not just hearing what's said. You're hearing why it's said that way. And most people have never been listened to at that level. That's why it's powerful. That's why it's insightful. And that's why, if you've stayed this far, you're becoming a decoder. Subscribe if you feel the shift happening. Because once you decode words, you decode intent. And once you decode intent, you understand the room. There's this friend. The one, always smiling, always saying yes, always full of energy, until the very last minute. You've made plans, booked the place, reserved your time, and then the same text arrives. Hey, something came up. First time, you believe them. Second time, you still give the benefit of the doubt. Third time, you start to feel that itch. But the fifth time, that's no longer coincidence. That's a pattern. And patterns don't lie. Here's the truth most people avoid. Prediction is not magic. It's observation. It's the kind of understanding that comes from staying quiet long enough to notice what never changes, and what suddenly does. Because people don't behave randomly. They behave cyclically, repetitively, predictably, under stress, under pressure, under comfort. Most people just never track the code. Let me show you how. Every person you meet has a rhythm. Not in music, in behavior. There's a way they sit when they're calm, a tone they use when they feel in control, a pacing they follow when they're being honest, a sequence to how they smile, how they breathe, how they move when no one's watching. That's your baseline, your foundation, your reference point. And most of the time, they stick to it without realizing, because it's comfortable, because it doesn't require thought, Now here's where it gets interesting. The moment something shifts, you don't guess, you detect. That slight delay in their answer. That micro pause before "I'm fine." That glance to the left before the nervous laugh. Each one a deviation from the pattern, a break in the rhythm. And that deviation is always triggered by something. Let's go deeper. Imagine you're talking to someone. They always respond with enthusiasm. Quick texts. Instant repli. Then suddenly, they go quiet. You wonder, did I say something wrong? But the key isn't to panic. It's to rewind. Replay the last interaction. What topic were you on? What emotion was rising? What word made their rhythm change? Because that shift isn't arbitrary. It's coded. In the field of behavioral analysis, this is how professionals understand deception. They don't pressure. They don't accuse. They observe deviations. They ask neutral questions. Watch the breathing, the blinks, the pauses, the word choices, and then they introduce one variable. Mention a name, bring up a date, drop a location. If the person's body shifts, if their tone changes, if their answer changes speed or depth, they've found the pressure point. Not because they were told, but because the pattern revealed it. You can do this in daily life, but it requires 3 disciplines. Stillness. You can't map behavior if you're always reacting. You must become the observer. The background. The neutral presence they don't feel threatened by. Repetition. 1 reaction means nothing, but 3, that's emerging pattern. And if you map 5, 10, 20 interactions, you can predict how someone will respond before they even know themselves. Precision. Don't just watch what they say. Track how they move. When their voice rises, when their gestures shrink, what words disappear when they're nervous? What habits vanish when they're uncomfortable? This is behavioral analysis. And it works. Here's a real-life example. A manager says, "We'll revisit this in the next quarter." Sounds professional, neutral, but they lean back. Their fingers tap the desk faster. Their eye contact drops, and the word "maybe" slips into every sentence. That's not planning. That's avoidance. If you didn't notice the pattern, you'd stay hopeful. If you did, you'd prepare alternatives. That's the understanding. Once you have their baseline and you've marked their deviations, you don't just read behavior anymore. You anticipate it. You know who will become distant, who's losing interest, who will retreat under pressure, who will maintain loyalty until it's no longer convenient. And all of that comes from pattern recognition. Now, let's be very clear. This isn't cold-hearted. It's clarity. Most people waste years because they hope patterns will change. They won't. Not without deep internal shift. But you don't hope. You observe. And that gives you an edge most people will never have. So next time something feels off, don't brush it aside. Don't explain it away. Don't excuse it. Check the code. Track the rhythm. Map the shift. People tell you who they are by what they repeat and what they hide when the rhythm breaks. Humans are patterns. You just never had the interface. Until now. Let's bring it back to now. You're sitting in a cafe. The person across from you keeps glancing at their phone. You used to think, maybe they're distracted. Maybe they're busy. But now, you see it differently. That's behavioral displacement. A microescape. They're not just checking the time. They're trying to mentally exit without physically leaving. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. But awareness is only the beginning. Understanding people isn't instinct. It's a skill, a muscle. And like any muscle, you train it through attention, repetition, and feedback. Let me give you 3 real-world exercises. Simple, quiet, and remarkably effective. First, spend 5 minutes a day just observing. No reacting. No fixing. Just scan the room. Look at people's postures, their rhythm, where their eyes go, who they look at, and who they avoid. This is how you silence your bias. You stop projecting. You start collecting data. Second, pick 1 person a day. No interaction required. Give yourself 60 seconds. Map their emotional state from distance. Look for tension in the jaw, the pacing of their walk, the slowness or speed of their gestures. The absence of movement speaks louder than presence. Your goal isn't to be right. It's to be aware. Third, train nonverbal responses. Next time someone says something sharp, don't defend. Don't explain. Just look at them. Hold eye contact. Let your silence carry the message. This isn't passive. It's intentional. Remember this. Social intelligence isn't about reading others. It's about quieting your own noise, your assumptions, your hopes, your projections. The cleaner your lens, the more clearly you see what was always there. Picture this. A person sits in a meeting. They say nothing, not a word. Others speak. They perform. They debate, trying to prove something, trying to fill the silence. But this person just watches. And when they finally stand up to leave, no one moves. No one interrupts. They don't know what this person is thinking. They only know they feel it. That presence, that awareness, that understanding, and that is what social intelligence feels like. You see, true understanding doesn't chase attention. It recognizes it without trying, because real insight isn't being heard. It's seeing clearly while others perform. If this has stirred something in you, if you've always felt like the observer in a world of noise, then this is your training ground. Subscribe. Stay sharp. Develop the awareness that no one sees. And when you're ready for the next layer, we go deeper. This isn't a video. It's your next evolution. See you there.